Hey Josh, how are you?
I am fantastic, Elliot. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. This is a bit unconventional for us that we're recording on a Sunday morning, but I think it is we wanted to keep to our schedule that we promised ourselves, however long ago, and make sure that we don't miss a week. So I know I was sick on Tuesday, our normal recording day, so I've thrown us a bit of a curveball. So yeah, excited for the conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I'm actually kind of thankful that we're recording in the morning as opposed to the afternoon. It's a nice change of pace.
Well, it's been almost 1 year, or I forget the exact quitiversary for you per se. Was it the 25th? Is that
No,
right?
it's the
No.
11th. We passed it
Oh,
already.
look at that. We sailed past it. I didn't even congratulate you. Look at me failing in my friendly duties, but congratulations.
Yeah, thank
1 year
you.
on the other side.
Indeed, it was actually kind of I don't know, it felt really good to me to acknowledge the date as I was approaching it. And this year it happened to land on Saturday. And Lori and we had some things to do during the day. And I mentioned it that morning. I'm like, this is a special day for me. And she was not quite sure what I was referring to. And I said, yeah, it was 1 year ago today when I closed the laptop for the last time. And she said, oh, that's right. I'm really surprised that it means anything to you. She's like, I'm surprised you even think about it. I'm like, yeah, it is, it's a milestone of sorts. So in my own way, I guess I just kind of made it somewhat selfishly. Like I felt like, this is a pretty big deal. And we had some things to do that day and just kind of, talked about it a little bit. And then the following Monday, I went on a long bike ride to kind of commemorate it because that was the first thing that I did on the Monday of my first Monday of being retired was I just took a long bike ride. So did the same thing this year at a different location and enjoyed the day and it was wonderful. And yeah, it's been fun to kind of reflect back on the year and see how things have been.
And now all of this starts to make sense in my mind is that Saturday the same Saturday that we had talked about going to a specific brewery in town?
It was.
Yeah, see? The gears are slowly turning over here. And I do remember calling you and you were in the middle of a bike ride and
Yeah.
I just thought, hey, good for Josh that he's not knee deep in a house project right now. So I knew that you like it was a good bike ride and you were anxious to get back to it. So
Yep.
glad to hear that history is echoing in that way.
Yep. Same here.
And of course, it is a momentous occasion. A 25-year long career and is that correct?
Yeah,
Did I say
that's
that right?
right.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
You knew U25 was in there somewhere.
No, no, yeah, no. I was like, I'm pretty positive it's 25 years, and so yeah, it's a big deal when all of a sudden a habit of 25 years goes by the wayside. So yeah, I'll kick it to you first to say, how have you generally felt 1 year removed from that big decision?
I think overall it's been really, really good. Definitely more positives than negatives. And I mean, I shouldn't even say it like that because I don't think that there's been very many negatives overall. We talked in previous conversations about at some points early on, I was maybe trying to do too much and I got kind of burned out because I was like, hey, I have all this time. Let's schedule all these things. And I was trying to put way too many projects on my to do list and trying to make sure that I was doing all the things that I wanted to do. And it was kind of like, I felt like a kid in a candy store where I was just trying to go in so many different directions that I got burned out. But I think I've since figured out how to not let that happen. And life has been a lot less stressful.
Yeah, that's good to hear that the power of saying no has emboldened you here in retirement and that you've settled into a more appropriate pace, I think, is, that I'm not peppering you with house projects. That's always a good stage one. Trust me, they are never ending, but I'm glad to hear that you feel like you've settled into the appropriate pace for you. I would say what is the big goal or next step in if you were to look 1 year ahead from now, what will have changed from this previous year?
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, I kind of considered that question for myself as well as I was thinking through this because I was looking back and like, here's all the things that I accomplished, and here's all the things that went well or that I learned or were surprises to me. And then I thought, okay, but as I look forward, what do I think the next 12 months should look like? And I think generally it's going to be a lot of the same that I've experienced over, let's say, like the last 6 months. But some of the things that I wrote down that I really want to try to make sure that I put a little bit more focus on is, and you might laugh at this one here, Elliot, is I'm calling it kind of like small group social activities because one of the things that I learned was that I tend to do a lot of solo hobbies, such as going on that bike ride. I need to probably reach out to some of my other five friends and say, hey, I'm going on a bike ride. Anybody want to join me? And same for hiking and just things like that. And then the other project work and things that I do, like working on my rentals and things like that, I'm usually by myself. So I had an opportunity to go hiking with a couple of buddies from our FI group this past week, and a lot of great conversation, and it felt more stimulating than exhausting for me. And it's one of the things that you and I have talked about as I'm a bit more introverted. I'm totally fine with small group settings, but when we get into those large groups, it's a little bit too overwhelming and overstimulating for me. And I leave with, a feeling of exhaustion as opposed to a feeling of, being filled up. So that's something that I want to really focus on and spend more time doing. It's just getting together in those smaller group settings and making that a bit more of a priority than I have let it be over this last year.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic that I want to drill in on just a little bit is I know that time is just generally precious in whatever capacity you have or don't have it. And for myself, I know that obviously I'm in a certain phase of life where I have young kids. Time away from the house is always at a premium. Yet some of the activities that I do are just kind of habitual, right? You know, doing this activity is something that is removed from the family. However, I, I see great value from it. I think Dawn sees great value in it, whereas maybe some other activities that maybe I engage in, I don't see quite the same value. So to tie this back in with a past episode that we did was Brandon from the Mad Scientist, his whole article on the idea of the FI community and hey, this isn't a lifestyle, it's not a religion, it's meant as a way to solve a specific problem in money to allow you to live the rest of your life. And so in that way, I feel like I have gotten hyper focused into the community aspect of Phi. And I think I'm going to try and take a little bit of a step back, which isn't saying a whole lot for me because I go to literally, I mean, pretty much every single Phi event in St. Louis that is organized by our local chapter. But something that doesn't quite fill my cup in the same way that maybe it used to in the past was going to all these case studies and other things that I'm just not getting the same value out of that activity. And like you said, I think it is Fi should be about connecting people that have similar interests and allow them to say, yeah, hey, we've solved this money problem in our own ways, but we all belong to a certain community, but that should be a platform for us to go do other things. So, like you said, go for a bike ride, go play frisbee golf, go for a hike, go to a brewery, like whatever it is, whatever you're passionate about, go do that thing. And the idea of a small group, I think is despite everything I know about myself, is the way that I still prefer to interact. I will give one more short story, and I know this has been a giant tangent, but I went to a Phi social in this past week, and our buddy Josh and I caught up for about an hour, nearly an hour, one on one during the middle of a social where we were basically completely detached from the rest of the group. And then we got a friendly ribbing of, hey, you guys gonna come join us? And maybe I turned a little beet red, but yeah, I mean, that's the way that I prefer to interact with people to really develop those deep relationships. Happy to join with you in hopefully some of these mini social excursions.
So I just got to say, knowing you and Josh getting together, you were probably talking about the future of the doom and gloom of AI and how it's gonna destroy us all someday, right?
That certainly was one of the many topics that we had, but no, he was getting probably more of a life update from me more than anything else.
Okay,
But
that's cool.
but he does think that AI is going to take over the world.
I definitely land on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to that debate, and I've passed him some information that I've thought to be, and you know, people that are much, much more intelligent than me that look at this stuff all the time, and I tried to give him a different perspective on that. We'll see where this thing takes us over the next several years. But yeah, your points well taken there, and I missed that one because, as you said, and I think we're going to try to do a whole conversation on this, is the how to say no, the power of saying no, when to say no, that kind of thing. And I said no to that social, not because I didn't want to go hang out with people, but because it's just I know you were heartbroken. There was just, a lot of things going on during the week, and I was like, yeah, I had some other things going on at home, and it just was like didn't it just didn't fit my schedule for that day, for that time, and I would have had to maybe stretch myself a little bit too thin. And that's one of the things that I have learned about myself over these last 12 months is I feel better mentally and then sometimes physically if I just really try to focus on one thing per day, one major thing per day. And even though it goes against what I just said, like I want to try to make sure that I put myself out there for more of these small group social activities. That was one of the situations where I had to say no. And I was okay with that. I think I'm further away from that like fear of missing out type of mentality that I did have for a period of time, especially when it comes to the group aspect and the community that we've created in our local Choose FI group.
Yeah, the FOMO is still quite real for me, I think, and maybe one day I will cure myself of such an affliction, but it still lives alive and well in my heart, I think, at this point.
Well, hey, I wanted to kind of give maybe a little bit of my thoughts on how things transitioned from a career aspect, because I know that's something that people talk about quite a bit. And I actually did a little bit of research. I just asked our favorite AI friend, ChatGPT. I was like, hey, what kind of questions would you ask someone that's been retired for a year? And one of the things that came up was just like, how did you transition in your career? And we had an episode a couple months ago about the transition from full-time employee to retired early, FTE to RE. And I think I went through a lot of that then. But one of the things that kind of really stands out to me is I didn't have that like identity or that lack of identity or that need to like transition from, I was this person that did this job and was a part of this company to now I don't have that anymore. That never really like entered my headspace or occupied any of my mental energy. And I was, kind of thinking back on it as to like sort of how that came about, or maybe what worked for me at least. It was I had that long, gradual, I guess, glide path, for lack of a better way of saying it, where as we talked about, I gave that 14 months notice. And then as time went on, I was like handing things off and I was basically just trying to transition myself out of my role as a middle manager and put that either back on to the people below me or the people above me, or just really try to make sure that I was backing out of things that just really didn't add any value. And so that accompanied with my last, I guess, month or so of employment, I had several weeks of vacation still. And I actually took 2 solid weeks of vacation prior to my last full week of work. And by that point, we had already hired my backfill. And I guess it was probably in February or March that things were really slowing down for me. And I just was logging in and participating in things, having kind of like final conversations and just trying to be helpful where I could be, but not really trying to lean into things too much. So for me, I mean, I think I was already kind of going through that shift gradually, as opposed to like, hey, I'm going at it every day and this is, I'm a part of all these things and, long, stressful days, and then all of a sudden nothing. I didn't, I really had a real, I guess, nice, slow, gradual decrease in my workload that it just really didn't feel like I had that, that issue of like, oh, now I have this new structure that I need to get used to.
Right. Yeah, and I think I mean, first of all, that's great to hear that. I think obviously results may vary, right? Person to person is going to see how well they have kind of detached from that identity that they had at work, and is that something that they really held near and dear to their heart, and how they kind of just view themselves outside of the confines of work. I will say maybe a question back to you in that regards is, how do you answer everybody's favorite cocktail question or intro question? Hey Josh, what do you do? What do you do for work? Or what do you do? How do you feel like you answer that question these days?
One of my biggest surprises is that I don't really feel like I've been asked that question hardly at all. And I don't know if that's either because I'm maybe not meeting new people, that could be part of it. It could be that it's just coincidence that that hasn't really happened to me too much, but I would say even part of the surprise along with that is that even when people do hear that or then they know that about me, there isn't too much interest. I don't feel like people care all that much. And I kind of thought going into this that I would get that question more often, and then I would be like, I would either be in a situation where I was describing like what I do or what I did or how I got there, or maybe even just having conversations about what financial independence was. And then it really hasn't came up too much, surprisingly. I mean, I have certainly told people along the way and they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah, right? You're like, yeah, it is cool. Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's good to hear because, I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that, and I know that you've posted videos online about your own feelings around the big R word, and I mean, I'll ask you right now is, do you feel any differently now than you did then about saying that you're retired?
I still struggle with that. I was actually, and it's not so much that I'm telling people that, hey, I retired early or anything like that. Like just this past week, a couple of guys that I went hiking with, I found myself saying the word retirement, but then like throwing up like quotations around it. And I'm like, why are you still stuck in this mindset of like feeling like I almost feel a bit of awkwardness that I'm saying, and these guys know me and know my situation, but I still say like, yeah, I'm retired, and I throw up like little air quotes, and I'm like, why do I do that? Why can't I just own the word? And I don't know if it's because that in my mind I feel like it belongs to a person that is 20 years, 15 to 20 years older than me, or if it belongs to someone who doesn't necessarily have, I guess, some form of side hustle or other kind of project work. Like for me, it's working on my rental properties that has been kept me a lot more busy these last couple of months than it has at any time in my past, really. And so I'm almost like in the back of my mind justifying that, hey, I'm not the guy that's just, you know, focused on hobbies and fun all day, every day. I do this other stuff too that I may not necessarily want to be doing, but I have to do. So I'm not necessarily retired. I have some form of a self-employment or whatever you want to call it. And I guess that's why I still struggle with the R word.
Sure. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, obviously that that audience was, I mean, some, I mean, the most friendly audience that you're ever going to come up to about that particular topic is you don't need a qualifier, you don't need anything. It's just to say, yeah, hey, just living that retired life.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, obviously, I've ribbed you here and there about your particular subject that you just brought up, your your rental work. Do you feel like, as I would say from an outsider's perspective, that type of work comes in waves, just like every other type of work generally does, but that you may be in a heavier wave right now? Do you feel like once you kind of crest and that goes back into more set it and forget it type of mode, that you've got activities and passions that you're ready to explore? I know you've talked about hiking and biking and woodworking and any number of things in the past that you're ready to fill kind of that time void with.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. I don't concern myself with that at all. I mean, one of the things that I, another surprise that I had is that I had all these lists of things that I was going to do, and I have barely scratched the surface with any of them. I have all these projects around our own home that I want to complete, and I know I've heard people talk about a year or two into their retirement journey, and they're like, I crossed off all those items in the first 6 months, and I'm like, wow, I could not even imagine. And maybe that's just maybe my list is longer, or maybe I work at a slower pace, or whatever. But I still have all that to do. Like you said, I still have all my hobbies and things like that. I'm a little bit, I guess, concerned that once I get these the maintenance and repair work done on the couple of properties that I am working on, we're going to be in the middle of summer, and it'll be at a point where I'll be like, shoot, it's like 100 degrees or whatever, 90 something degrees with high humidity. I'm not going to be wanting to do as much outside activity. So I'm trying to really balance it right now and trying to do as much as I can while the weather is nice. So a lot of times when I am working on these houses, I'm only working at most 5 hours a day. And then I'm spending the rest of that time trying to do something else that's outdoor related, because I know that this window is it's not going to last for too much longer, knowing what our weather is like here in the Midwest. So yeah, no concerns. Another thing that I've noticed is that I've never been bored, in these last 12 months. And I know that's something that people concern themselves with, is like, how am I going to fill my time? What am I going to do with my time? And it's not the same for everyone, obviously, but if you have a variety of interests and you keep an open mind to trying new things, it's really hard, I feel like, to be bored or to get bored. And I think sometimes boredom is different for everyone. It could be that you don't have the right balance of things that are like mentally or perhaps even physically stimulating. So you might be doing all these things, but they're not really providing some form of a purpose. And I think that that word is to some degree maybe overused, but it's probably a situation where somebody's maybe they're just not being fulfilled by doing all these fun activities, that they need something else that is going to be a challenge for them. And I kind of learned that about myself too. Even though working on these rental properties is kind of a chore. It's a challenge for me. It keeps me mentally stimulated. I'm trying to figure out how to solve a problem still. And I wouldn't want my life to be problem free or even really stress free. There's a certain level of good stress where you're really like actively trying to navigate through something that's challenging. And that's always, I feel like that's something that's for longevity's sake. That's something that you need to make a part of your life for the long run.
Yeah, I think you're really right about that. Is we've heard multiple people say that you just don't want your life to just be sitting on a beach drinking cocktails. That's not going to be a fulfilling life. Just sitting there watching Netflix, playing video games. Like there has to be some level of friction's probably the wrong word, but like you said, there it has to be some level of work to feel like you are living that good life. If you were just reading books every single day, or even just riding your bike every single day, or whatever, I think you would eventually get to a point where you would feel displeasure about the life that you're living. And the title of a article from Pete that always rings true in my mind is the "Seek not to be entertained" was the article that he had. And I think, yeah, like obviously I'm not at this point in my career yet, but even where I have experienced gaps in employment for whatever reason, where I have had a longer period of downtime, it is you can certainly see where people who have early retired or who have taken a mini retirement or whatever it may be can potentially go back to work because they feel like they're not feeling that life of purpose. Like at least, somebody else is setting what I have to do every single day. And so I have to figure out this problem and figure out how to solve it. And at the end of that, I get that little dopamine hit to say, "Yep, I conquered this mountain and on to the next challenge." Right? But if to your own point, there is no struggle, there is no challenge, you're not going to feel that level of contentment. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you haven't hit that point and I hope that continues to persist throughout this next year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it will. I mean, just looking ahead, I feel like that I have plenty of things to occupy my time that are going to be challenging that I'm going to continue to need to balance the like work or project stuff with the fun stuff. And I mean, just even like this weekend, as an example, we were trying to do some painting on a house yesterday. We spent 6 hours. We got it all done. Yay, so that we could record today, which worked out well for us. But I mean, even just so my wife Lori still works and she's putting in some time on the rental property as well and balancing her time. So you mentioned like you can't sit around all day watching Netflix. And yesterday I painted for 6 hours and then I came home and watched quite a bit of Netflix. So it was a tough job and I didn't regret that I didn't go get in my full 10,000 steps or whatever other, trivial goal may have been on my list. I could just kind of sit back and relax and waste several hours because I had done something that was pretty physically challenging throughout the day. And, it also was something that's been like we've finally given ourselves a deadline with this property that we want to get it completed by the end of April. So it's like, okay, we got to really put in some extra time here. And, that's the kind of thing that I think is going to continue for quite some time. And I don't have any concerns with getting to that point where it's like, what do I do next? And I don't have anything to stimulate me.
Yeah, your list continues for sure.
Yes, it does.
Now, I will say, minor detour. Where are you at in Game of Thrones now? Because this is important life questions.
We have crossed over into season 3. I think we're on episode 3 of season 3. And we're hooked.
Very
I mean, we're
good.
addicted.
Oh yeah.
I didn't watch any yesterday because Lori actually went and did something else. So we're probably going to get together tonight and binge watch 2 or 3 episodes, I would assume. But yeah, I've been missing out all these years.
That's right. Well, what do you think? Where do you go next on this journey of self-discovery in early retirement?
One of the things that I've also kind of learned to, I guess, tweak or adjust as from a mindset perspective, which has been hard, and I still struggle with this a little bit, is the scarcity versus abundance mindset when it comes to money. And I think even early on, so to back up a little bit, retired April. Hey, I didn't use the air quotes that time when I said the R word.
Hey, look at you.
Retired April 11th, 2025. The market had taken quite a turn downward at that point in time. I don't know if you remember or not, but that was probably going through like February and March. It was starting to trend downward, and I wasn't really looking at things too closely, probably partly because I didn't want to know what was going on. I was kind of head in the sand kind of mentality. I remember being on one of our FI groups and telling folks that, my date was coming up, and they're like, "Oh, there was one guy, I won't mention his name, but he's like, oh, this couldn't be a worse time to retire." And I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And it kind of maybe gave me pause for sure because I was a couple weeks away or maybe a month or so away. He's like, all the stuff that's going on in the world, and at the time, like the tariffs was a big hot topic, and the markets were way down. I think we were really close to 10% bear market by the time I actually retired. And so my net worth went down pretty quickly. And it was we weren't in a drawdown situation because Lori is still working, but it gave me a sense of like, oh gosh, we got to make sure that we're making wise choices. Even though we did have a great year and we did a lot of traveling and all of that kind of thing, it was still in the back of my mind. And then even recently, we had a pretty significant downturn over the last couple of months in early 2026. But I've really kind of come to terms, and some of this has just been trying to look at things from a different perspective and maybe look at different resources and really think through like what does our life look like from a financial perspective? What do we think our future is going to look like as far as sources of income and things of that nature, and what kind of withdrawal strategies can we explore? So I'm really trying to come to terms with the possibility of spending more money. And I say more as in an adjustment to what I thought our budget would look like. So for instance, we're going to talk about it later this afternoon. Lori and I have like some of the wish list items that we want to complete around our house that I'm not going to do myself, such as putting on a new deck, building a roof over that deck, and having a fence installed. Just things that I know are going to cost a pretty good amount of money, but like I need to do it. I mean, you and I have talked about like if you looked at our potential withdrawal rate, we're well below the 4%, and we need to get to a point where we're comfortable with spending. And I think I'm there. It'll be interesting to see as I get some of these quotes back and start talking to people what that's actually going to look like and how I'm going to feel about that, whether or not I'm actually going to pull the trigger. But, that is something that I'm going to be working on. And then going back to the rentals, I've mentioned it a couple of different times that I think that I want to start at least exploring the idea of selling a couple of them, the ones that are kind of the pain and also not in the best of locations. So I'm actually going to be calling my agent tomorrow and talking through what that looks like for one of them. And maybe as I move forward, that's going to take some additional level of the quote unquote, work or busy work or whatever off my plate, even though that's not a bad thing. But those are a couple of things that I'm looking forward to exploring more as we move into this, the second year.
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, any way to stop me from calling you smog is a good step. And then of course, moving your your good work that you're retaining today into the ability to still do work that is purposeful for you and fills your cup in whatever way that it is, but you're choosing whatever that work is, not just persisting because of choices that you've made previously. Like if you obviously are like, yeah, I want to go get rid of these, quote unquote problem child rentals, and you're like, yeah, hey, this is what we like. Let's go get some more that are less of a headache per se. Yeah, like that's great. At least you've made that decision again that says, yeah, I think that that's the transition that I want to make. Or maybe it is, hey, I want to take the proceeds of this, I want to drop it in to my buddy the market, and now I'll go find other ways to feel fulfilled throughout my day that I'm choosing each and every time that I go do it. Not because, hey, I have a vacancy and I'm ready to go replace a floor or whatever it may be.
Yeah, you made a comment in one of our recent episodes that's kind of been living in the back of my mind where you said, "You know who doesn't call in the middle of the night?" It's my buddy VTI.
Yeah, that's true.
And it goes back to, I said I don't want to contradict myself too much and say that, I want to continue to have challenges and solve problems, but there are some of those things where it's like I don't want to solve this kind of problem. And there are some of those properties and or tenants where it's like, yeah, the I told Lori yesterday, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, on this one in particular that I'm gonna call about tomorrow. It's just, I'd rather, like you said, work on those that are maybe that I appreciate more or that are going to appreciate more over time, as opposed to those that they just need a lot of work, or they're too far away from home, whatever the case might be. The negatives outweigh the positives.
Yeah, wholly agree with you. And yeah, lights me up a little bit to hear that maybe something that I have said has landed with you. But and that's not to say that VTI lives rent free in any of our minds either. Like you said, when there's a downturn, maybe that's the functional equivalent of, getting that phone call at 3 a.m. is saying, yeah, hey, I've got a busted pipe over here that I need fixed. So, to give an analogy.
And I was going to say it might not even move to VTI. That's the other interesting point in all this is Lori and I were talking through it, and I was like, okay, well, I think if we took that money, we could, of course, we could pay off debt because we have some mortgages on a couple other properties. But I mean, in today's economy, I mean, these are rental properties with 3.5% mortgages on them. So why would I want to necessarily pay that down right now? So she was saying, oh, we could use that money to do this or that, fun stuff. It could pay for, another trip. It could, whatever, kind of like maybe go back to some of the mindset that we had in our 20s. It's like, oh, we got a windfall. Let's figure out how to spend it in a fun way.
That's right. I mean, yeah, because certainly you guys are in a unique position in that you are in the language of our buddy Carl from Mr. 1500, you are Wi-Fi, and so you're not in a true drawdown scenario. So it's a little bit more nuanced in that you are retired early, yet still have income coming in from obviously various sources, being both rental as well as a W-2 that Lori works. But I think that is an all too common scenario that most retirees, early retirees face, and probably just retirees in general, is the fear of spending too much is probably much stronger than the alternative. And I'll be very interested to see once you guys get to that point, yeah, what those numbers kind of look like. I know that's certainly something that in my own life and my own situation currently, as we've talked about me being in the States as opposed to moving to Europe, that means different things for my job, and thinking about, okay, originally we were saying, well, does the 5% make the most sense? We want to do these gifts for my kids, trying to make sure that I have dialed in all of those things appropriately for my own risk appetite, and not just myself, but my family's risk appetite, and acknowledging that we also have a super long runway, and making sure that the decisions that we make now don't have, you know, catastrophic implications on the other side. Not that I think that they ever really would, or that we wouldn't be able to adjust, but in some ways, do you want to be constantly thinking, well, what about this? What about that? Because if we make a more aggressive decision than, let's say, even just the 4% rule.
In addition to the, I guess, questions about whether or not you're too aggressive or not aggressive enough or whatever that live in your head, the other thing, I mean, and maybe this is just for me and the life stage that I'm at now, is am I being aggressive enough with my spending? Am I being aggressive enough with making sure that I actually do the things that I think will bring some level of enjoyment? I mean, we've just for our house, for example, you always, or I always heard that you shouldn't, for fear of, I guess, sequence of returns risks, you should make sure that if you have any big projects or repairs that need to be done to your home, you should do those prior to retirement. And I mean, like you said, Lori's still working, so that's not too much of an issue. But it's part of the equation and things that I've been thinking about that, we've talked for years about putting an addition on our deck and then putting in some form of a roof, or just so that we can use that space, and we really enjoy our backyard, use that space throughout the year as opposed to just during the months that it's seasonably acceptable. And I know it's going to cost perhaps even tens of thousands of dollars to do that work, or to hire someone to do that work. But it's like, do I want to just sit here and keep thinking about it and letting it occupy my headspace for years to come? Because one of the what ifs that we always talk about is, what if we move? What if we decide that we don't want to live here or in this house or in this town or whatever? And it's like, well, I think we talked about this a little bit whenever you were thinking about moving. It was that I just need to do some of these things that I'm going to enjoy now, even though I might move 5 years, 10 years from now. I can enjoy it for that period of time, as opposed to either never letting it happen and talking myself out of it, or doing some kind of upgrade or update right before I go to sell that I never get a chance to enjoy.
Yep, and that one rings true for myself as well, because in the thought pattern of us potentially looking at selling our house, we've done some projects that I would say we've certainly held off for a long, long time, because we said, oh, like, what if, exactly the same way that you were saying is, well, what if we move? Like, do we really want to spend all this money if we're going to turn around and we're not going to enjoy it? We're going to move somewhere else. Like, is this just throwing money into the fire, so to speak? And after our decision to stay put in the States, we certainly have made more decisions that have been like, okay, let's make some of these, capital improvements around our house, so that we do enjoy things more. So we're doing windows on the entire house this year. We did some more cosmetic upgrades around the house. We're having, I mean, once again, I've talked about the state of my office right now is because our basement's all torn up, but that's getting done here in another week or two. Is that the flooring at least will be done. Dawn's actually right now patching she's mudding and taping some drywall behind me. So, We too are going through that state of mind to make sure that, yeah, like you want to make sure that you are spending money and getting enjoyment out of it because I'll give the analogy of how I play some video games is I'm that guy that collects things and items like let's say a grenade or whatever it is and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I got to save this for the big boss." And then I'll finish the game and I'll have all this inventory of stuff that I never used because I was saving it for this thing to happen. And I think that's exactly how I live my life in a lot of regards is, oh yeah, like I'll be ready to go do this when, and I will give so much kudos back to Dawn to say, like, these are win scenarios. Like, we need to enjoy the ride the entire time. And that really harkens back to probably our long ago episode on being cheap versus being frugal. And I think in a lot of ways I've been cheap in that regard. So I'm glad that she's able to help me come to that realization and try and make active steps towards something better. So once again, long tangent, but I would say hopefully that it sounds like you guys are going through a similar path is let's make sure that we enjoy our house.
Yeah, I love that analogy that you shared about the video game play because I could see myself doing something very similar, but as I relate it to my own life, it would be, I think about the end a lot, not in a negative way, but like how I think that what I wanted to make sure that I either have or leave behind. And I'm not the kind of guy who is necessarily worried about being able to provide my heirs with a ton of inheritance because my kids are no more than 23 to 30 years younger than me. Hopefully I live a long healthy life and they're going to be in their 60s and 70s by the time we pass and they're going to be old by that time. So it's not like I'm going to be in a situation now. I could have grandkids and things like that that I would potentially want to leave something to, but at this point, at this stage in my life, I'm not really too worried about that. So it's like I've collected all these things along the way. Why aren't I taking advantage of them and making use of them for the things that are going to make life a lot better or make my surroundings a lot more enjoyable or whatever? And shifting that mindset is something that I'm still working on, but I think as I look forward and I use all the different tools for projection and things like that. I mean, in the latest, I was looking at Empower and it was saying that I have like a 98% success rate. And I'm like, I know this is bad. I know this is not good. It needs to be in like the 80% range because I'm
Yeah.
essentially not don't have a plan to spend enough. So I need to maybe start modeling some of that in because they have that available. Like what big expenses do you see coming up? And as I mentioned, I'll talk through some of these things that we want to do on our house, or maybe I'll put in a trip to Australia or New Zealand or something like that that I know is going to cost a lot of money. And those are the kind of things that I need to maybe start putting on the timeline so that I make sure that in my mind I can see how they're reflected in the overall like long-term plan.
Yeah. No, I mean you're saying all the right things, Josh. Is I know Aubrey Williams has been talking about this quite a bit in his talks on projection or like guardrails and outputs from various Monte Carlo simulations and whatever else. And I think, yeah, that chance of success really needs to be pivoted to that chance of change really is what it is more than anything else. And I'm not saying that you have to subscribe to, okay, I've hit this, like you don't have to subscribe to the guardrails model to make a meaningful change to make sure that you are living the life that you want to live, because otherwise, like many people would say, is you've got the hogs model, the errors organizations and government. And that's where your money's going to go if you're not directing it yourself. So, yeah, I mean, make sure that you're spending in the way that your values actually align. So,
And to some degree, as my mindset is shifting, I feel like it's the sooner the better, the earlier the better, because I mean, you don't know what tomorrow brings, but you also, one of the things that I've long known is my own mortality. And I think through, I mean, it goes back to like the die with zero mentality, but as you think about like the health curve of your own life, as you get further and further into the future, the ability or the desire to spend on the things that you really want to do is going to decrease. And you know, you're more likely to spend on healthcare than you are on these trips to, you know, the other side of the world, or to the, you know, major improvements to your home. And that's something that I really need to wrap my head around, because these next couple of decades are really, it sounds long, but I know that it's short in the grand scheme of things. And I don't want to like end our conversation here on a downer, but it's just it's just making sure that you keep that kind of thing in the back of your mind, so that you're not constantly making choices and decisions to like optimize towards, am I foregoing something to just, like you said, be a little more cheap, or hey, I can live with this a little bit longer. Like, you know, I mean, you guys are, it sounds like you guys are doing some amazing things there at your home. Putting in new windows is going to be very beneficial for a lot of different reasons. And it's sure you can get more years out of your current windows. It's not like they're broken and busted and danger or hazard, but it's probably going to bring more enjoyment to just your overall, like how your house is going to feel, how it's going to look, and all of those things. So, I mean, that's really great that you guys are making the choice to do that.
yeah. And the same way that your deck and roof finally making it onto your house is going to hopefully provide you that level of social interaction that you're looking for in your life, and no and all the enjoyment that you and Lori are really looking for as well.
Yeah.
Well, Josh, this has been a great conversation as always. Look forward to the next one.
Yeah. We've had some really good feedback in our email over the last couple of weeks, and maybe it's been over the last couple of months, but we just actually started looking at our email and our private email accounts that are linked in our show notes. So we're trying to do a better job of looking at that, and really appreciate all the feedback that we got. That really spoke to me, and it gave me like a lot of fulfillment that people were saying, hey, love the conversations and keep it going. And I think one commenter even said, hey, I listen to you guys every week, and I'm really excited when a new episode comes out, and you know, all those things. So our email links are down below. And one of the other things that I wanted to mention is that Spotify always gives me a message whenever I upload a new episode, where it's like, you should have more followers than you do, because our listeners, our number of listens is quite high. So they're like, encourage people to follow you on Spotify. So that's what I'm doing here.
Exactly. Yes. No, we really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. I think really the most important currency that we all have in our life is our time and our focus. And so you're giving that to us by joining on our, at least my rambles and rants, and Josh's coherent thoughts. So we really do appreciate it. So, and and I do want to say thank you for all the comments. We did get a number of emails. I am terrible at looking at emails, so they are not lost. And many of you said, "Hey, I'm not looking for anything." They just wanted to drop in and say, "Hey, thank you for putting out real conversation." So,
Yep.
thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. We'll catch you next time.
Yep. See you, Elliot.
See you, Josh.